Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So, between comments on YouTube as well as questions on the Discord, one of the common things that came up was how to improve your teams. You know, players are starting to reach a plateau and they're not quite sure how to improve their teams to do better in Grade Fests or to potentially do better in events such as Wing, TFD, or Collabo Fest. Now, we won't talk about Collabo Fest specifically today, but we will talk about how to improve your teams for Fests and some ideas to help improve consistency in Wing or TFD. With that all being said, let's start things off by introducing you once again to each of the units. For players that maybe haven't picked up the game yet, this could be useful to determine what type of teams you'd like to play, and for players who have been around, this might help brew some ideas as to which cards might be useful for your specific team. So first we have Illumination Stars. Illumination Stars have a heavy emphasis on stacking active buffs while amplifying the next idol in order. They have high levels of chainability, and each SSR set complements each other nicely to allow for greater and greater damage before the big finish with a well-timed memory appeal. They're very useful for beginners, and still have a lot of impact at high level. Next we have Antika. Antika is a team that has an emphasis on revenge damage, so low HP. They also have low HP attention avoiding skills, as well as late game stalling, and even interference through interest down and melancholy. If you want more of an enfeebling style team, with an emphasis on late game, definitely consider Antika. If you want the polar opposite of Antika, then you might want to check out Alstroemeria. They're a team that completely flips where the damage comes from in comparison to Antika. They can very quickly shift from early game offense to mid game stalling, and they emphasize high HP appeals, lack of attention, healing, as well as damage mitigation. The Houkago Climax girls are an extremely aggressive playstyle that focus highly on early game damage and passives, with dangerous debuffs waiting for you afterwards. They're one of the riskier but easier to build teams in the game. And lastly we have Straylight, a bizarro version of Illumination Stars. Straylight also aims to stack active buffs, but rather than sustain higher damage, they end up sacrificing buffs to amplify damage all at once. They have an extreme emphasis on ideal rotations with a clear end goal. They're among one of the harder teams to build for in terms of consistency. Now, in terms of how to make your unit stronger, it goes without saying that the best way to improve your team is to improve how much damage they can deal. So to do so, not only will you need to train like normal, but you will also need to find and unlock stat uncaps for your cards. Without these uncaps, you might find yourself strapped for damage and unable to compete with teams around you. Every support and produce card have their own lineup for stat uncaps, playing into their intended use, so optimize for success. Down below we have an example mono support SSR who has two different uncaps, one as a vocal 50 and the other as a dance 50. So once you spend SP to unlock these abilities, your idol's main stat for vocal and dance will be improved by 50. Sort of. It will allow you to go up to, from default, 550 vocal and 550 dance. You'll still need to train for those additional 50 stats, but that can be a big change if you feel like you've been missing out on damage or felt that 500 in each stat felt a little low. Now, where do those stats go? Fests. And what's really important is where your unit goes in Fests. An important detail to note is that the position can matter a lot to an idol's potential. Each position in Grade Fest has a special bonus and a corresponding stat amplifier. On the left here we have a Kiriko with 500 dance versus a Kiriko with 1000 dance, and there's a pretty big difference when you look at it. But, what all does that really mean, and why don't the numbers add up? Well, we'll talk about that in a sec, but first, let's talk about the bonuses. The Leader. If you place a unit in the Leader slot, it improves the odds of passive activations by 50%. So, if you have a 30% activation rate passive, this then becomes 45%. 20% passives become 30%, 40% passive becomes 60%, so on and so forth. They also receive a 200% bonus to their mental stat. The three stat-based positions, Vocal, Dance, and Visual, get a 200% stat bonus for their respective position, and the Center receives a 150% stat bonus to everything except Mental, and it also determines the team's memory appeal, which can be very important as to what your team's end goal will be. Now, here we have some diagrams of showing where those bonus stats we were just talking about comes from. One other important fest detail is the same unit bonus. Same unit bonus is a 20% stat bonus to all stats, and in order to activate it, you only need to have one additional member from the same unit on the team to receive the bonus. But it is also worth noting that this bonus does not stack. If you are running 5 members of Antika, the bonus is still 20% and not 80%. And this bonus is added alongside positional bonuses, so to say Dance's 200% increase instead becomes a 220% increase, as opposed to the 200% increase which is then boosted by 20%. Otherwise the numbers would be a little bit different. So as we can see from the diagram, Mamimi has 500 mental as a leader in the first position, meaning that she would then get amplified to 1000, but once Kiriko is added to the team, this is amplified to 1100, and the rest of her stats also receive that 20% bonus. Kaho's stats do not change because she is not a member of Antika, but if we were to place a Houkago Climax Girls member on the team, she would then receive a 20% bonus. The other important thing to note is the Memory Appeal bonus, which is applied across all of your idols and corresponds to the lower diagram. Your center determines the memory level from level 0 to level max, and sets a flat 1.0 multiplier underneath the heart. Your additional idols will improve the multiplier displayed below it, and the total bonuses are all added together. So at memory level 0 and 1 there's no bonus, but from memory level 2 onwards you receive a bigger and bigger bonus. So the maximum amount you can reach is a 1.30 multiplier for having 4 other idols at memory level 5. This can be a huge change in damage for your Memory Appeal, and can be very big when it comes to determining whether or not you're going to be winning a judge over, or being just short of winning. With all that said, clearly you need to know what supports work best for the cards, now that you have an idea as to what your units will do. Well, when building your idol, not only do you need to improve their stats and earn enough SP to unlock stat uncapped skills, but you also need to find passives that complement your playstyle. So we're going to go over a few notables for each team. Starting with Illumination Stars. The limited Illumination Stars trio emphasizes multiple stats with strong dual stat passives and effective stat uncaps. The permanent versions of the Illumination Stars SSRs are a little bit weaker and have more focus on single stats, but have a very similar end goal of trying to emphasize all stats. Their playstyle suits most any team, given that it can play at a high speed and slow speed style, and can more or less complement every team in the game. Antika cards utilize passives that require you to be lower on health, and because of this, they are by nature a little slower. But many teams can build around this to utilize these passives earlier than normal. Many teams that try to use Antika passives actually aim to have lower mental, so that way they don't have to take as many hits in order to reach the ideal health threshold for many of these passives. Alstroemeria supports emphasize higher HP and means to keep your HP safe for the turn. Some cards include healing, while others include damage cut to reduce incoming damage. Many of the damage-centric supports have strict HP requirements, such as 80% or 90% or healthier, so be careful as you build. Alstroemeria-centric supports definitely favor units that have higher than 500 mental, because the larger your health bar is, the less likely it'll be you'll fall below 10% missing or 20% missing in order to retain the ability to use their passives. Houkago supports emphasize fast-acting passives with higher values but higher risks. They can reduce your defense and increase the likelihood of being hit, which are always huge risks when it comes to these supports. However, the damage is nearly unmatched by general supports, so you'll see these cards floated around a lot, especially their initial SRs, which are by far some of the easiest supports to use in the game. Lastly, we have Straylight, who focus on attaining active buffs as quickly as possible, while also applying passive bonuses based off which active buffs you currently have on you. These can be seen as good generic supports as you start out, with low risk but rewarding passives. They actually pair off perfectly early with the later versions of the SR Houkago cards, since they apply active buffs with their appeals, thus allowing you to use Straylight passives. One thing that's important while you're building your idol is that you have to consider 3 important nodes: the positional passive, the gold passive, as well as the uncap. Positional passives, which you can see highlighted with the circle, require your idol to be in the specific location, so grab these if you're building an idol for the vocal dance or visual position. Do note that if you grab a skill that doesn't match your position, it won't be activated by you, nor can it be activated by another teammate. So if you place a dance idol in the visual position, they will not be able to use a dance positional buff. However, if you place them in the dance position, they will be able to use said buff. Gold passives are the meat of a card, and usually what determines how strong or weak a card is considered. Always grab these for your leaders for that added chance of working, but make sure to get them for your other idols too to improve their strength. And lastly, uncaps, which are typically the most expensive, but also the most important for stat building. So, with all that being said, you might have the question of, well, now I know who to run, but I'm not earning enough stats. Is there any way to improve how much I'm earning, whether that be SP or mental or any of my attacking stats? Well, if you're finding yourself having trouble building up your idol stats, Masteries from your support skills are what will be your biggest aid. Each of these Masteries have their own perks, so use them as you see fit. First, we have the generic Stat Masteries. They earn a flat amount to the stat listed on the card as long as they're in the correct room and you work with them. Kiriko has Vocal Mastery Vocal, so if she's in the Vocal room and you work with her, you receive a bonus to your Vocal. Choco has Radio Mastery Dance, so if she is in the Radio room, working with her earns you Dance. And this particular Mamimi has Dance Mastery SP, so you get to earn additional SP for working in the dance room, which is very useful. Next we have Audition Masteries. These only work in Wing, and they earn a bonus equal to the Mastery level when you achieve first place in an audition. And again, it's worth noting that these do not work in the 2 auditions in TFD, so you'll only be able to utilize these passives in Wing. So from cards like the Hioris with SP, as well as Mono with SP, you also currently have Rinzai with Vocal, Meguru with Mental, Amana with Visual, and Tenka with Dance. There aren't an amazing number of options for Audition Masteries right now, but this list grows every so often, so keep an eye out for more Audition Masteries if that's a playstyle that you prefer. Next we have Stamina Support. This isn't necessarily tied to a stat, but can absolutely be helpful for building your idol, as Stamina Support has a chance to reduce the amount of stamina from all rooms by 50%. And this stacks additively with an additional Stamina Support and caps out at 100%. So if 2 of these activate on the same week, every single room is now free. So many of these cards, like the Kiriko we mentioned earlier, all have that ability for you, which can definitely help by allowing you to do more lessons or more jobs more often, as opposed to having to rest more often. And similar to the Stat Masteries, we have Stamina Mastery. Instead of it being a main stat, it reduces the amount of stamina of the mentioned room by a flat amount as long as they're in the room, such as the Sleepy Amana, who reduces the amount of stamina from photo shoots, Mamimi from the visual room, the other Amana from the vocal room. But it's also worth noting that Stamina Support and Stamina Mastery can be combined together, to the point where those rooms can start healing you under the right circumstances. It's a very potent combination if you have the ability to set it up. And lastly, we have 2 special abilities. First is Perfect Mastery, which has a chance to double the amount of stats gained from a room, as long as the idol who activated the passive is in the room with you. So as long as either of the Choco SSRs or the Jury SSR are in the room and you do not fail the room, you'll be earning double of whatever the room says you'd be earning. It's very useful for high burst bonuses and makes building a hell of a lot easier. And lastly, we have one of the most unique ones so far, which is Natsuha's Excellent Mastery. This increases the effectiveness of Excellence equal to 2 times the skill's level, and requires at least 50 bond to start activating. Excellent boosts stats by 20% times the number of idols with Excellent in the room, so Natsuha at max having a bonus of 32% on top of that 20% can be extremely good for building up stats over time. So definitely consider this if you're building visual and want to experiment around with the idea of building up more stats over time as opposed to Perfect Mastery's more burst-like style. So, with that all being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you so much as always for watching, and of course, if you have any questions about anything in the video, feel free to leave a comment below, or if you have ideas for something else we can talk about in regards to either team building, or maybe one of the alternative game modes, or anything in particular, we'll try to answer it to the best of our ability, or maybe we'll make a video of it. For now, we prepare, because in a couple days we're going to have a new banner to talk about, so look forward to that next week. My name is Cho. Thanks again for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.